Near Crown Point, the first French presence is actually on the far side, on the Vermont shore. They built a small stockade fort in 1731, which is actually right at the base of where the bridge enters Vermont. And when they were doing construction on the new bridge, they did archaeology, and they found some evidence of that original stockade fort. In 1734, they start construction of the fort on this side, the larger fort, which becomes known as Fort St. Frederick. And it's kind of an odd fort in that instead of barracks buildings like Fort Ticonderoga, they build a citadel, like a 4 or 5 story, looks like a castle in the middle of it, which from an artillery point of view is not a good idea because it's a target. It's never actually fired on, but at Fort Ticonderoga, where we get off the bus in the parking lot, you may have noticed the parking lot slopes up and then the grass slopes up, and that's called a glacis. And there's some glacis around the big fort over here as well, but the idea is at a distance of half a mile away, you can't see the walls of the fort. You can see the rooftops, but that glacis is there to protect from incoming artillery. And we really haven't talked about the different types of artillery, but most cannon fire solid cannonballs. So you're not, no matter what you see in The Patriot or Bugs Bunny cartoons, most cannons don't fire exploding shells during the American Revolution. You do have mortars that lob exploding shells, and you do have howitzers which can fire either solid shot or exploding shells. But the majority of artillery in use is cannonballs, and their success is putting holes in things, which is great out on the water, because the more holes, the more likely they are to sink. Batter down walls. Out on a battlefield, you might use an artillery with grape shot, canister shot, where it becomes not so much a weapon against a fortification, but an anti-personnel weapon. Think of it as a giant shotgun. So you're not, in The Patriot, you're not going to shoot a solid cannonball at a group of people coming at you. You're going to load it with canister shot. Think of a tin soup can full of musket balls. And when it's fired, it shatters the can and scatters, so it does more damage. The challenge with the advantage also in using a canister shot is it doesn't actually do physical damage to any fortification stuff. It's just definitely an anti-personnel thing. So anyhow, the citadel is not the most ideal military. It's kind of a cross between the castle and a Vauban-style fort, which Vauban-style forts were really designed for artillery in mind. A castle's not easy to defend against artillery. This is the southernmost French outpost in the Champlain Valley from 1731 to 1755, when Fort Carillon's construction is beginning. But by placing a French fort here, the French are already kind of thwarting a treaty. There's a treaty that ends, let's see, the War of, is it the Austrian, the one that we know as Queen Anne's War.
Austrian secession.
That treaty that ends that sets the border between British America and French North America up at what is called Split Rock, which is about 15 miles north of the Maritime Museum. So under that treaty, this is British territory. But there's nobody here, and it's the French who first push in. So they're already kind of, when they build that fortification across the bridge, kind of thumbing their nose at the treaty that at that point is over 20 years old. So this is the southernmost French fortification for about 24 years or so, and there is a civilian population here. It's all across the lake on what is now the Vermont side. So you've got the military post here, the civilian support over there. There's actually farms over there, and the land patterns in modern Vermont topography around here, especially with satellite views, you can make it long, narrow strips, which is very much the French-Canadian way of making sure everybody has access to the water. So your property might be 100 feet wide on the lake, but it might go inland a mile, so that everybody has that access to the lake. It's the same all between Quebec City and Montreal. Long strips So because the waterways are so important. It is believed, somebody was talking on the way, apples. Somebody was talking, New York is a big apple producer. The French bring apples to New York, well, to this region. The first European apple orchards are over across the lake here in the 1740s. And those farmers help support the garrison that's here, and there's not an official parish church, but there's a priest here, and actually even when Carrion is built, the priest is here. So the religious center is here, the commercial center is here, the military center is here, and Fort St. Frederick is the target for Sir William Johnson at the beginning of the French and Indian War in 1755, when he doesn't get beyond Lake George, the Battle of Lake George in September 1755. You can see it's a little bit smaller than Fort Ticonderoga, but not a lot smaller. But this was a lot taller with that nice big citadel up top. After the fall of Fort Carillon to Amherst in 1759, he comes in and invests this place as well. The French do the same thing. They delay a couple days. They blow up the fort. Because of the concentration here, this fort is practically ruined in 1759. And Amherst begins constructing that monstrosity behind us, which has 5 bastions. Fort Ticonderoga has 4. So it's like a 5-pointed star instead of a 4-pointed star. And what's there today are the earth walls that were behind the timber walls, and in some cases stone. There was some stone built up on some of it, but it really maintains its shape. But you can see how high the walls are, and it's a little bit higher in elevation than the lake than here is. Now, from the French point of view, this fort is here to protect from an attack from that direction. We're going to go into the fort, and you know how great the French decision was at Ticonderoga. You got the great view south. You really can't see south too well. But by the time Amherst is building the fort, his enemy's coming from that direction. But here we're actually out on a peninsula, and the lake, there's a bay, Waga Bay, that goes down this way about 1.5 miles. So by putting the fort a little bit more that direction, it commands that bay as well, because the big fear for the British was somebody could go down that bay, cut across by land, and just bypass the fort if it was too close over here. So we're going to walk in, give you a chance to look around. There's some interpretive signs in there. A chance to look at the bridge, the new engineering wonder. It was a real big deal for us when that bridge opened, because we'd been without one for 2.5 years. And
It's pretty impressive that they got it done 2.5 years, especially since it was 2